In 1964, something strange happened in California. A group of educated men were asked to decide what children across America should learn in science. Now, you'd expect something serious, right? Careful reading, deep checking, real understanding. But here's what actually happened. They sat around a table with science textbooks in front of them and started rating them. One man flipped through a book, scribbled a score, and moved on. Another did the same. A third signed off. There was only one problem. One of the books wasn't even finished. Some pages were blank, and still it got rated. Even more shocking, it got a good score. That should make you stop and think, how do you rate a science book that doesn't exist yet? Well, you don't if you're actually reading. But something else was going on, and the only person in that room who actually read everything was a physicist named Richard Feynman. Now, Feynman wasn't a textbook writer. He wasn't a school administrator. He was something different. A man who didn't believe in knowing words. He believed in knowing what the words mean. So when California asked him to join the textbook committee, he agreed, not because he trusted the system, but because he didn't trust it. And then the books started arriving. Boxes, heavy ones, hundreds of textbooks delivered to his home. He did something very unusual. He didn't skim them. He read them, page by page. First grade books, high school books, everything. And the deeper he went, the more something started to bother him. Not small mistakes, not typos, something deeper, something fake. Let me show you one example he found. A children's science book showed a picture of a wind-up toy dog, and underneath it asked, what makes it go? The answer printed below was, energy makes it go. Now pause. Does that explain anything? Or does it just repeat a word that sounds like an explanation? Feynman pointed out something very simple. You could replace the word energy with any nonsense word, and the sentence would still sound right, but it wouldn't mean anything. It was not science. It was a shape of science. A label pretending to be understanding. And that pattern repeated everywhere. Definitions that define nothing. Diagrams that explain nothing. Words floating on top of confusion. But the textbooks weren't the only problem. Something worse was happening in the room itself. The committee members weren't really reading. Some were flipping pages. Some were just scanning covers. Some didn't even open the books properly. And then came the part that stuck with Feynman the most. The courtesies. Expensive gifts from publishers. Dinners. Briefcases. Small bribes dressed as politeness. Feynman called them what they were. Everyone else pretended not to notice. And then came the moment that broke the pattern entirely. A blank textbook arrived, empty pages, and someone on the committee still gave a high rating. When Feynman asked why, the answer was almost unbelievable. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. Think about that. Not it was good, not it was clear, just nothing wrong. Because nothing had been read, nothing had been understood. It was evaluation without engagement, science without thinking. That was the real problem. Not bad books, but pretending to judge without actually looking. Years later, Feynman stood on a different stage. Caltech graduation, bright students, proud parents, clean robes, big expectations. And he didn't give them comfort. He gave them a story about people on distant islands during World War II. Those islanders saw American planes landing with cargo, food, radios, supplies. It looked like magic. Then the war ended. The planes stopped coming. So the islanders tried to bring them back. They built fake runways, wooden radios, bamboo control towers. They even mimicked the gestures of soldiers guiding planes in. They copied everything they could see. But nothing happened. No planes returned. Why? Because they copied the ritual, not the understanding. They had the form of science, without the science. And Feynman gave that condition a name, cargo cult science. Then he said something very direct to the graduates. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That line cuts deeper than it sounds, because it means this. You can look like you understand something without actually understanding it. You can pass exams, solve problems, say the right words, and still have no idea what is going on. that is the illusion, and it doesn't stay in one place. It spreads from textbooks to classrooms to entire education systems. But here's where the story gets even more uncomfortable, because decades later, science started to confirm something strange about memory itself. When you memorize something, most of it doesn't stay. Within a day, a large portion is gone. Within a week, even more fades. This was measured long ago by a psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. He called it the forgetting curve. And for over a century, people thought this was a flaw, a weakness, a failure of the brain. But modern neuroscience flipped that idea. Forgetting is not a bug. It is a system. Your brain is not a storage box. It is a filter. It keeps what is useful and removes what is not, which means something uncomfortable. A lot of what is forced into students during exams is not meant to last. It is meant to be repeated, tested, and then discarded. So here's the real question Feynman kept asking, even if he didn't always say it directly. If you are going to forget most of what you memorize anyway, what does it actually mean to understand something? His answer was simple. If you really understand something, you should be able to explain it in plain language. No jargon. No hiding behind big words. No pretending. Just clarity. If you can't explain it simply, you don't really understand it yet. That is the test. Not exams. Not certificates. Not memorization. But clarity. Because real knowledge doesn't feel like repetition. It feels like seeing something clearly for the first time. And once you see that difference, you start noticing something everywhere. People speaking without understanding. Systems teaching without clarity. Education becoming performance instead of comprehension. Feynman didn't try to destroy education. He tried to expose the difference between looking smart and actually understanding. And that difference is everything.